So you got yourself a motorcycle. It's the best thing to ever happen to you. Even better than that one time when you discovered sex. Now your motorcycle is probably faster than any car you've ever driven. And after a couple weeks, maybe even a couple months, that speed starts to normalize. You get a sickness growing inside you. A sickness for more speed. So you hop on the forums and Danny420 is like, oh bro, you need an exhaust and some velocity stacks and a new ECU. So today, we're gonna go faster, but we don't need any of those parts to do it. We're diving into the world of suspension. Get ready to raw dog your computer screen or your TV or your phone for the next 15 to 18 minutes. Time to go. See this sucker? Look at that. Welcome to Big Time. It's bike time. But before we can even start modifying our project motorcycle, I need to get a baseline. So today I'm at our local kart track. I got the Ninja behind me in fully stock trim. We got stock brakes, stock tires, stock engine. So I'm gonna be putting down some hot laps, seeing how fast I can ride this bike in stock trim around this track. Time to go get a little loose. Time to go. Set some hot laps. Let's do it. So how does suspension help you lay down faster lap times? As your bike goes around the track itself is trying to slow you down with off-camber turns, uphills, downhills, tight corners, dips, bumps, and surface changes. Now the more grip you have during those situations, the faster you can go. So how do you get more grip? Well, sticky tires are a great way to do that, but the stickiest tire has no traction when, for example, it's in the air. So it's the job of your suspension to keep your tires planted in contact with the surface while those track changes occur. Now with the stock setup, it does a good-ish job in a variety of settings, but the main drawback is that you don't have any adjustability to account for those track changes. Upgraded suspension gives you the ability to fine-tune your settings on a given track. And one thing people often forget is that tuning your suspension is a balancing act. One particular setting might be great for one corner, but terrible for 3 other corners. So part of the fun in tuning is trying to figure out a setup that on average of all your turns produces a faster lap. Okay, I did 19 laps today. Top 2 times 51.32 and a 51.94. Speed is 72.9 miles an hour. Okay, so 51.32, that's only after a couple sessions. It's getting hotter, so the track's getting a little slicker. And these tires in stock form are not the best. They're getting a little greasy, so they're sliding around a lot. Not ideal for the track, but that's okay. We're gonna try to get, if I can get in the 50 point something, that'd be pretty cool. That'll be a great baseline. So when we start tinkering with this thing, that'll be the time to peak. A couple more sessions of the day. Let's see what this little baby Ninja can do. Oh, baby Ninja, that's cute. So after a few more sessions, I was getting hot. The track was getting hot and my times were getting cold. The fastest lap I could lay down was a 51.32 second. Not bad for an all-stock Ninja 400, but I want to go faster, so I got a plan. This past Monday was International Dog Day. In honor of all the pups out there, today we're dropping this shirt featuring my sweet baby boy, Chewbacca Burton. Every Chewy shirt we sell, a portion of the profits are gonna go straight to the West Side German Shepherd Rescue. They're a no-kill rescue that saves dogs like Chewy here from high-kill shelters, and they get them adopted to good homes.
Not only are we dropping the Chewy shirt, but you guys have been asking for it, so we're also dropping the Big Time Bud shirt as well. We're also gonna be restocking our classic Big Time shirts, our Big Time hats, and our sticker packs.
And none of this would have been possible without today's sponsor, Shopify. Shopify is a commerce platform that allows you to start, grow, and manage a business. It's what we use to launch our store, and it's what millions of people across the globe are using to sell online, in person, and around the world.
Shopify has made starting Big Time way easier. They have a simple drag and drop store editor, easy to use marketing tools, and a back office that oversees all of our operations, which we tried to do in our own back office. It didn't work out. Does our back office have to be the back of the truck?
Yes.
Why?
When we started Big Time, we made a point to only work with brands that we would personally use, brands that we believe in and trust. Making cool shirts, that's one thing. Getting them to you guys is another, and that wouldn't have been possible without Shopify.
So if you're starting your own business and need help, go start your free trial of Shopify today at shopify.com/bigtime. That's shopify.com/BigTime. Or click the link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for supporting the companies that support us.
So the plan for today is to take our stock Ninja here and remove its shock and its front forks and then replace it with some nice shiny gold goodies. Then once we get these parts installed back on the bike, we're gonna go back to the track and see if they make me any faster. Before we do that, we're gonna see why these things need to get replaced in the first place and see how they work. I'm at my buddy Jim's shop. His shop just so happens to be in his garage. So he runs a shop called Mad Labs and he is a suspension guru. That's his bread and butter. So we're in good hands today. He's gonna be helping me out. Also, Jim has a dyno in his garage where his wife lives over there too, next to his garage dyno. He's living la vida loca. Now, removing our stock suspension on our Ninja 400 was fairly easy. You just jack the bike up, support the engine so it unloads the suspension, remove the front wheel and the front caliper, and then loosen 4 bolts which clamp onto your fork legs, and they slide right on out. Super easy. It also helped that Jim had a couple of specially made tools. Jim's got a shop where he's just like, I've encountered everything before, so I know. Reminds me of my grandpa's shop where it was like, he'd have all these specialty tools, cut Allen keys at weird angles or weird bends. He's just like, oh no, that's for this tractor, or that's for this particular four-wheeler, or whatever it is. But you work on them enough, you know, sometimes you just gotta make your own tools. One, perfect. It's a boy. So this is one of our fork tubes. This is the right side of the bike, and all the magic happens inside here. This is where all our valving is. This is where all the oil is. Spring is right here. This is called the stanchion. Do we call it stanchion? Stanchion tube?
The chrome part.
Yeah. I always pronounce it wrong. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna totally disassemble this fork and we're going to play with its insides like a serial killer and a raccoon that he found on the side of the road. I want it to be in, but I don't feel like you can. It's so messed up.
I'm glad you guys edit.
So we'll get a better idea once we get this apart, what's going on the inside. But what we have to do is look at the new parts. That's the fun stuff. So we have an Olin's Kawasaki FKS 224. So this is it right here. This is what we're putting in. Now these, while they look identical from the naked eye, they actually serve different functions. One controls the rebound of the fork and one controls the compression of the fork. You wanna know how that works? So when I say rebound or compression, what am I talking about? I'm talking about damping adjustments. Damping controls how much energy is dissipated when the suspension absorbs bumps. Now, if we were to just have a spring with no damping at all, your forks or your shock, they just turn into a pogo stick after hitting a bump or a pothole in the road. So we surround the spring in a chamber filled with fluid, suspension fluid, and we regulate the flow of that fluid through orifices in the damper. Think of it like a French press. See this sucker? Look at that. The holes inside the press regulate how fast or how slow that fluid moves as a force is applied to it. The bigger the holes, the faster the fluid flows, the less resistance, and vice versa. Tiny holes, more resistance, slow fluid movement. When we talk about damping, we're specifically talking about compression and rebound. Compression damping controls the rate at which the spring is allowed to compress, while rebound damping controls how quickly or slowly the spring extends back to its original position. That's the basics of a shock or a fork, a compressible spring and an incompressible fluid. So simple, yet so complex at the same time. Also, we have to install new springs. Now these springs are rated for my weight with all my gear on. So these aren't adjustable. You put them in, you set them. The ones on our stock fork setup are much softer, so it'll instantly be a little bit stiffer and we'll have to play with the valving to account for that. The whole goal with your suspension is to be able to be right in the sweet spot of its travel, right? You don't want it to be too high up in the travel to where it's only using a little bit of stroke, or too low into it to where it's bottoming out. You want to be able to maximize the amount of travel and be right in kind of that sweet spot. So with these springs, they're going to allow us to do that. Now, before we can even put these springs in our front forks, Jim is hooking up the suspension dyno with our stock setup to see how good or how bad they operate in their stock configuration.
This can check temperature. So we're waiting for it to hit 90 degrees to actually start the test.
This is a suspension dyno, a $15,000 piece of equipment that is super cool and tell you a bunch of useful information. Suspension dynos are mechanically or pneumatically powered pieces of measurement equipment that measure force. They simulate real-world conditions and can give you data on how the suspension will perform under different circumstances. Once you load in the fork or the shock that you want to test, the dyno compresses and extends them at a known stroke and speed, and then measures the force at that speed. You can also load up a specific track and put the shock or fork through a simulation as if it were installed on a bike going around the track in real life, when actually it's in Jim's garage in Southern California. So with this kit, we're using the factory lower and the stanchion tube. All we're doing is replacing all of the internals. So all the guts get swapped out. One bolt on the bottom of the fork, zapping off the top cap, allows us to drain the fluid inside the fork and get our stock spring and damper out, getting us prepared to install our brand new Öhlins kit. Now our stock system uses what's called a fixed orifice system. Fixed orifice meaning you don't have shims that are regulating the flow of oil inside the shock. This is the only hole that's controlling your compression side, and this is the only hole that's controlling your rebound side.
That's right.
Basically, you're stuck with this in the stock setup. That hole's never going to get any bigger or any smaller. It is what it is. Now with our Öhlins setup, we can basically adjust the size of that hole on the fly with our clickers. Did I say anything wrong?
That's correct. Perfect.
I love it when I nail it, you know? And with our stock internals out, all we have to do is slide in our brand new Öhlins damper, our new spring, and add some oil. What Jim's doing right now is making sure the amount of fluid that we have is at its appropriate level. So some companies will run it by volume, but a lot of times in the fork, they'll measure by distance. When everything is in the lowest position and you fill the fluid up. So this tool right here is pretty cool. So what you do is you run it down there, you fill this fork up as much as you want, set it at the height that's required. This is 150 millimeters. And then he'll take a syringe and he'll suck out all the fluid up to that point. So you overfill it and then you remove it. With our oil level set, we can put our spring back in our fork tube and put our top cap back on, which can be a two-person job. Now with our kit fully installed, now it's time to put it on the dyno. Now once we ran our forks on the dyno, they produce a graph that looks like this. On the x-axis, we have absolute velocity. That's how fast the fork is moving up and down. And that's in inches per second or millimeters per second. On the y-axis, we have recorded force in newtons or pounds. So the dyno, it moves the shaft of the fork at different speeds, and the force is recorded at that speed. And you can break this graph into two main sections. Everything above 0 is the compression side, and everything below 0 is the rebound side. Now we have a bunch of cool lines and a bunch of cool numbers, but what do they all mean? This is a dyno graph with the clickers in the fully closed position, and this is it fully open. And everything in between are different clicker adjustments. Those clickers are what sit on top of the forks, and you just use a little Allen key to adjust it. And what you're doing while you're adjusting it is just opening or closing the size of that orifice, allowing more fluid or less fluid to flow in. This is representative of a bunch of different dyno runs on a single graph. Now you might be wondering, hey Jerry, you have a bunch of lines for compression, but not on your rebound side. What gives? Well, if you remember, our kit comes with a rebound fork and a compression fork, and we dynoed the compression fork in a graph that looks like this. When we dynoed the rebound side of the fork, it looks just like this, but inversed. We have multiple lines going like this at different rebound clicker adjustments, and only one line on your compression side. Pretty cool. Now our stock fork looked a lot like this. Very bad. No adjustability. We can change nothing about it. It is what it is. So the cool thing about our Öhlins kit is that we have a lot of different force values that we can obtain at various shaft speeds depending on what clicker adjustment we have. And what's also great is that our Öhlins kit, the compression side, doesn't have an effect on the rebound side. So we get a lot of different adjustments that we can put in to help us maintain traction when we're at the track and get the most speed out of our little baby Ninja. Now it's time to get after the rear end, and I'm not talking about butt stuff. talking about our rear shock.
This is the first time I've used Snap-on tools. Pretty cool. Pretty cool to use professional tools. Top is out.
Our stock setup, we have, look at these welds. these little tack welds on the lower mounting point right here. I'm guessing this has got to be steel, but cast steel. Now this shock is pretty basic. It has no adjustability outside of this collar right here. Now what this does is as this thing goes down, it puts more force, more pressure on the spring and sets your preload. That's it. Preload is the only thing that you can adjust with this shock. Now our Öhlins shock has a couple of different things that you might notice. The first is it has this big reservoir right here, so it is filled with nitrogen. That nitrogen pushes on the fluid inside this reservoir and prevents cavitation. That will cause irregularities in your shock's performance, so that's another improved part of this shock. We also have rebound down here adjustments as well as compression adjustments. This shock still has nitrogen in it. It's just pre-filled before they assemble the shock. You can't necessarily service it. Can you service the nitrogen in this stock folk shock?
No.
No.
It's not serviceable.
Yeah. So we'll be able to dial in our suspension a lot more with this setup versus old dinky doinker right here. So we threw our stock shock and our Öhlins shock on the dyno, collected some data, so then we installed everything back on the bike. The rear shock, the front forks, the front wheel, and we got to loading up the bike to get ready for our track day. Okay, we are back at our testing track here at Adams Kart Track, and today's the day to find out if the $2,000 I spent on these parts is worth it. Let's go spin some laps. So after a couple of laps around the track, the front suspension wasn't feeling all that great. But luckily, I know a guy who not only works on suspension, but also knows how to ride. So Jim just so happened to also be at the track with us so he can help dial in this suspension. Jim's the best, Mad Labs. If you get a chance to work with Jim in his Mad Lab, you should do it. Okay, so the springs that we put in the other day, they are too soft. I got a heavy butt and I didn't account for my heavy buttness. So they're a little too soft. We have too much sag in the front. So we're getting this kind of front end dive effect because the springs are too soft. So we need to be able to add a little bit more preload. And to do that with the springs that we have, Jim has made a couple of spacers. Basically, it allows us to add more preload to the front suspension. With our spacers installed and our preload set, it's time to go see if our suspension is worth it. All right, so after a bunch of laps, some tweaking of the suspension, we were able to get our time down to 50.32 seconds, a full second faster at the cost of only $2,000. The thing about when you start modifying parts, they kind of work hand in hand with other bits and pieces like the tires and the brakes. So if you like this content, you want to see more of us working on our little project track bike here, please like, subscribe, follow, do all that fun stuff, share with your friends. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Follow us on Snapchat. We do a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes. If you guys want to see that, join our Patreon. We're giving out a free sticker. You have, I think, a couple months to sign up so you can get that sticker, a couple weeks. I don't know exactly. I'll put the date down in the description below. But join that. It's called the Pit Crew. Look at this. Here it is right here. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. We love you so much at Big Time. Okay, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.